make a start, because it's not a difficult card, it's just a little bit involved because there's measuring and cutting and whatever. Right, let's just quickly run through what I'm going to be using in today's card. I'm using the Build a Flower die set, an absolutely fabulous die set. There's no embossing folder with this, and to be honest, I don't really think you need it. And you'll see when I show you what I've used and how I've used it in a little while. I think you'll agree. I'm also using the Variegated leaf embossing folder. Now this came with a die to cut these 3 leaves out. If you haven't got this, you could use the Essential Foliage layer in stencils and dies, because these were bought out at the same time as the Build a Flower, primarily to go together. So you could actually use that instead and use this branch here, but I just wanted individual leaves and I wanted them a little bit bigger than these are, but this will work just as well. So you know, that's a perfect substitute for this. And I'm also using a little bit of the Christmas Romance paper pad. We're going to start with the card that will form the base. This is what you're heading towards. Okay, so that's the front of the card and that's the back of the card. All right, so in order to achieve that, you need to do some measuring and some cutting. So this piece of card measures 5.5 by 8.25. All right, and on the long side, so on the 8.25 side, you need to score it at 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, 5.25, 6.25 and 7.25. Okay, so you're left with 3 channels on this side and 3 channels on this side and a piece in the middle. Okay, so now what you need to do is you need to cut lines in between your 1 inch and your 3 inch score lines, and then you need to turn it around and do exactly the same on the other side. Now you could just measure it, but what I thought would be safest would be to score those lines that you're going to cut. All right, so you need to cut between the 1 inch score line and the 3 inch score line. All right, so I'm scoring here at 1 inch, but I'm only scoring in between these two here because that's all I need. So I'm scoring at 1 inch and 2 inches, and then I'm scoring at 3.5 and 4.5. Okay, and then turn it round and do exactly the same on the other side. So you need to score at 1 inch just between those score lines, 2 inches, 3.5 inches and 4.5 inches. Okay, and we can get rid of the scoreboard because we don't need that anymore. I'll bring my cutting mat in, and I'm now going to cut between these lines, and this is why I decided to score. If you don't want to score your card, you could just draw a pencil line. You know, that's not a problem. You could do either. Now I prefer a knife to scissors. I prefer a knife to a trimmer, but all I would say is just be careful. All right, these are scalpel blades and they are very sharp, but they're my preference. You go with whatever preference is yours, but just remember to stay safe. Okay, so we're now going to cut between those 2 score lines where we've scored. All right, so we're doing that first one at 1 inch, preferably without moving the ruler, and then we're doing the second one at 2 inches, making sure you've cut all the way through the card, and then up to 3.5, now I've already done the bit of stenciling and die cutting and inking that I need to do, because the making of the card takes a little bit longer than the stenciling and everything, and you've all seen me do that plenty of times. Not that I won't ever do it again, I will, because as you know, Lisa's always bringing new stuff out, etc. Okay, now before you try and fold this, I would score all those, I would burnish all those score lines. All right, okay, so we're going to fold that over and score, and then we're going to do the same on the middle line. Don't worry about the little folds, they'll be fine. And then fold it over again and do the same again. And this is just to help you with making the actual shape in a little while. Alright, so we'll turn it over and do exactly the same on the other side, and just make sure that you line your card up each time along the bottom so that your lines are level, okay, because they do have a habit of moving sometimes, so it's always best just to double check that your lining up is right before you score it. And then the last one, this one's easy because it's a solid line. Okay, so you've got all your score lines. So what you actually want is, as I said to you at the start, on the wrong side you want it to look like that, and on the right side you want it to look like that. So on the right side it sort of looks like a bit of a spider. Okay, okay, and I'll just give those another score just to make sure. Okay, so that's the wrong side of your card and that's the right side of your card. Now we can get to measuring the other bits of card that are going to go on to decorate. All right, so I'll leave those bits to last. You need 4 pieces of card that measure 5 3/8 by 7/8. All right, and these are going on these side panels here. All right, so you've got cardstock that measures 5 3/8 by 7/8, and then you've got designer paper. This is from the Christmas Romance, and this measures 5 1/4 by 3/4, and that's going on the top of there like that. Okay, so that's those. Then you need 1 piece of card that is 4 1/8 by 1 3/8, and a piece of designer paper again from the Christmas Romance, which is 4 by 1 1/4, so that you're matting and layering on there. All right, and then lastly you want the pieces that are going on here, again Christmas Romance, and these measure 4 1/8 by 7/8, and the designer paper measures 4 by 3/4. Okay, so I'm going to put all these designer papers onto my cardstock first, so that these are actually having time to adhere properly. All right, you don't need much glue. Again, I'm using Lisa's high-tack glue, so you won't need much of this. It is fabulous glue for all your card making and all your sort of box kit projects and stuff like that, making boxes, even putting the MDF together. It's amazing stuff. Now there is only the tiniest mat on these pieces, so just bear that in mind when you're putting them down. You have a little bit of wiggle room with this glue, but not an awful lot. All right, so I'll just make sure that you can see what I'm doing. Not that this bit is difficult, you know, you've all matted and layered papers, I'm sure, but it's worth spending a little bit of time to make them look really, really crisp and accurate. There's no point going to all the trouble of making a fancy fold card if your papers don't look right when you've done them. Okay, so we're just gonna, I was going to do all these ready and just have it all done, and then I thought no, we'll go through and we'll make the whole thing from start to finish so that you can see the whole process and how easy it is, because it's, you know, it's one of those things that I think we look at cards on Pinterest and in groups like ours, and you sort of look at it and you think, oh, I wish I could do that. Where actually, if you just take a little bit of time, write it all down, measure it all, do all your cutting, and then sit and put it together, you can. You honestly can. I've made more shaped cards and more shaped projects like the gift box and the handbag that I did, and it is just, it's as simple as try it, because if you don't try it you'll never know, will you? Right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add down to the sides here and across the middle, and we're going to add all our pieces onto our base card. You see how quickly this is coming together, because I've done the measuring, I've done the cutting, and it just all follows suit. You know, it's so satisfying to actually see it all come together. Sometimes I think if you try it with sort of like a scrap of paper which hasn't got a great deal of substance to it, and you make a mistake, have you made that mistake because you haven't done it right, or have you made that mistake because you're not using the right product? Do you know what I mean? So I think sometimes it's better to just jump in, even if it's cheaper cardstock, and you know, you just use a cheaper cardstock than your expensive stuff. I mean, this is Lisa's texture card, and I just followed the instructions and cut it all out. I didn't practice first or anything, so you know, I think sometimes it's better to just jump in, if I'm honest. If I write it down in my words, even though my words look the same as most of the words that I'm reading on a blog, if I write it down, it's going in better than if I'm just sort of trying to follow a video or something. Are you with me? I think sometimes you need to just do rather than sit and procrastinate about it. Okay, so this one's going across the middle here. I'm just going to put this out flat. So that's going across the middle. Now you're going to lose some of this when you put your main piece on, but the effect is what you're looking for is the effect that you're going to get with all these little panels here. So whilst it looks like a bit of a waste, I don't think I would consider it a waste, because not only is it giving you a lovely effect, it's also giving your card a little bit more stability as well, because this is all adding to the strength of the card. Okay, so that's the base of your card. Okay, and I mean, how quick is this? It's not difficult, is it? You know, it's actually really quite easy. The most difficult part is cutting all your card and making the cuts and the score lines and everything. You know, it's not a difficult process, I don't think. Okay, so then the last four pieces of card that you're going to need is going to need two pieces that measure 5 3/8 by 2 1/8. Okay, that's your base card, which is going to go on there. And then you need two pieces of white cardstock, which measure 5 1/4 by 2. All right, and that's going to go on top of your cardstock. Now, when I flip this over, you'll see I've already done the bits that I want to do. So, what I did with the Build a Flower stencil set was I just put my piece of card onto my Ultimate. Yeah, so I used the Build a Flower stencil set and I just put it across the bottom of the card so that it wasn't totally on the card, it was hanging off either side, because I didn't want a full flower. All right, and then I just used a little sentiment that came with one of the older stamp sentiment, one of the stamp sets with the butterflies on, one of the first butterfly sets that Lisa bought out. I think it was Wings and Things. I'm not sure whether there are any of those still left, and I know that once they are gone they're definitely gone, they won't be back. Okay, so let's pop that down on our base card. And this will be where you write your greeting to whoever you're sending this card to. Okay, and this is going on the back here. Okay, so I knew I was safe writing the card size down on there, because I knew I was going to be covering it up. Right, so let's pop that down there. Again, don't need much of this glue because of how fabulous it is. I'll pop that down in the middle there, and you can see that just the tiniest matten layer, I think, looks far more effective than like a huge matten layer. I just think it looks smart. Yeah, so we'll flip that over, and then the last bit that we need to do is put our panel on the front. And again, this is exactly the same size. So this is again from the Build a Flower stencil set, and these are where my variegated leaves come in. All right, now I cut them out, die cut them, and embossed them, and then just went over with my stencil brush and the woodland moss blending ink and the juicy pineapple on top. But less is more. I put the ink on my brush and I took the majority of it off before I just brushed those leaves. If I just show you one of the leaves that I did, so you see I've just gone in with the green, and then I've toned that down a little bit with the yellow, because that woodland moss is quite a deep green. I didn't want it to be that deep particularly. I wanted it to have a lighter feel to it, so I just went over the top with a little bit of juicy pineapple, and I mean a very little bit of juicy pineapple, and I've just gone down the middle with cobblestones, just really to give the centres a little bit of interest. Not that you can see very much of the centres, but it all adds to the effect at the end. But when you're adding your leaves and your flower to this central piece of card, what you need to bear in mind is that your card shape is, what is it? It's about 4.5 by 5.5. So I'd probably put it in a 5x7 envelope, or something similar. You could make your own envelope, to be honest. But what you don't want is for this flower and these leaves to overhang the edge of the card. Unless you're using a bigger envelope, then it won't matter. But if you're using an envelope that you're making specifically to fit this card, then you don't want those flowers and leaves overhanging the edge of the card. All right, so we'll just add our glue on here, and this is our central panel for the front of the card. I've put a little bit more glue on here because there's quite a bit of weight in this with the 3D glue gel, and the flower and the leaves and everything. So I definitely don't want it to move or drop off or anything like that. I don't think it would with Lisa's glue, but I just want to make absolutely certain. And then you just centre that, and it's going to sit in line with your top piece that you've put across here and the bottom piece that you've put across the bottom. Okay, so there is your finished card. So it will stand up perfectly on somebody's table or mantelpiece or wherever they display their cards, and when you turn it over, that's where you will write your little greeting to whoever you send it to. And I think that is really, really pretty and worth sending to somebody special. So once again, thank you all so much for joining me. I really do appreciate you taking half an hour out of your time to spend with me on a Monday and a Thursday. Bye now.